So we are live. We are with Michel Collon. And first, I would like to introduce you to my Polish viewers. Michel Collon is one of the most famous critics of imperialism in the Francophone world. He is the author of many books, and it is the head of Investig'Action publishing house, which runs a website, YouTube channel, and publishes many interesting books. I have known Mr. Collon from the first years of my stay in France, and it was also by listening to his speeches that I have been learning French. Therefore, I would like to thank you very much for your studies. And I would like to ask you why you are no longer invited to TV since the war in Libya.
First, dziękuję bardzo. But that will be all. Not invited because in the mainstream media, you may not tell the truth. As Churchill for once he was right. The first victim is the truth. And you may not say that every war is made for the money, is made for the benefits of the multinationals. And of course, you are not allowed to prove it. It's a dangerous truth.
Yes, could you say something about your staying in Libya in 2012, in the time when Libya was bombarded, and you said something about Mr. Sarkozy, the president, the country which I stayed, and man who now I hope he will go to prison, and this history about Libya interests me.
Well, it was in 2011. I was in Libya twice in the summer, and I have the opportunity to visit a place where I could see the damages. It was the property of a rather rich man, and he has a big garden and several buildings, and it was bombed by NATO, saying that it was the headquarters of the military system in Libya, while it was just private. I have been visiting everywhere, it was private. And in this bombing were killed several civilians and many children, very young children, 2, 3, 4 years. And it was traumatic. NATO never apologized. And the life of this man was ruined, and he died a short time after that. And indeed, I made a short video of 6 minutes in French. Sarkozy, combien d'enfants as-tu tué cette nuit? Sarkozy, how many children did you kill this night? Which was also a song made during the Vietnam War. I see that.
Yes, you have problem with camera. Device not connected.
We can have some problems. This happens again with
yes.
With Zoom also. Shall I continue?
Yes. So it was a song, Hey, hey, USA, how many kids you killed today? And you
yes, indeed. So it was the same idea, and the video was seen many times. Now, I had some debates in Belgium. To explain to you, I was active around the question of war and information since 1991. I wrote a book, Attention Média, Beware of the Media. And I had some audience for this book in the Belgian public television and radio. The other media was complete censorship. And then when I continued the same work about the war against Yugoslavia, then it was completely censored. And it was the same in in the 20s. And then, surprisingly, I was invited to the Belgian television in 2011, including once about the Libyan war. But then I declared to our Minister of War, well, you are lying. And then, of course, well, I was said very politely, not like that, but this was the message. And this was not allowed. So since 10 years, I'm completely censored in the Belgian and French television. I was well invited in the French television. It was a very famous show called Ce soir ou jamais, This Evening or Never. And I was invited regularly against several ministers and NATO propagandists and so on, Israeli lobby also. And well, it was exceptional that I could defend really independent research about information. But this show of Frédéric Tadei, very famous in France, was also suppressed by the authority of the television. So it is now a big problem. Wars are made with our money, in our name. We are killing people. We are not fighting against terrorism, but exacerbating terrorism. And we have nothing to say, and we cannot debate about it. So that's really a big problem.
Yes, I watched this your when you were in this TV, and I want to congratulate you, because in Poland we don't have people like you who can be invited in the media, say the truth, and because they know the consequences that after this it will be censure. So I will ask you second questions. Something will be about Poland, my country. So I want to talk to you about mass media lies. In Poland in the 1980s and early 90s, there was a massive propaganda campaign promising Poles enormous wealth in the capitalist system. Polish workers believed that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were friends of workers and were convinced that as soon as they overthrew socialism, the standard of living in Poland would be the same as in Sweden or Germany. Wałęsa promised that Poland would become the second Japan. What happened was quite different, though. Factories were being closed, the famous Gdańsk shipyard was closed, millions of Poles became unemployed and later left for the West. Instead of prosperity, we have poverty. Instead of democracy, we have an authoritarian government of extreme Catholic fundamentalist right. And instead of the independence, we are occupied by the US Army. In 2020, over 140,000 more Poles died than were born. And the present-day Poland is a humanitarian catastrophe. Unfortunately, most Poles still believe in this Western propaganda made in USA. How would you explain that?
Well, I'm afraid you can explain it better than me, because you are living in the country and you know which influence and which mechanism are producing this, what we call the manufacturing consent. You know, the famous book of, excuse me, yeah, I'm a bit cold these days. Manufacturing Consent, a big famous book by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky, which we have published in French also, explaining that media system is not an independent system that can help the citizens to make their opinions. It is organized to make people consent to the opinion of the government, which is the opinion of the economic elite, of the main bourgeoisie. So it is not surprising. Now, I confirm that not only in Poland, also in other countries like Romania, Bulgaria, and most of the Eastern countries, actually, the promises were, I would say, electoral promises, but the reality was completely other. Now, I was not living in these countries. I've been there a few times, including Poland in the year 70, but that's not enough to have an opinion about a country. What we have been stating is that the idea of destroying the independence of Eastern Europe and destroying, well, it was a certain view, weak society, but there were some very good aspects. You had no unemployment, you had social security, you had healthcare, education and culture was more democratic. And the idea was not to make these good, these qualities stronger. The idea was to buy Eastern Europe, to buy it with economic goals, suppressing possibilities of economic factories and infrastructures which had a certain power, like in Poland and certainly in Eastern Germany, Czechia, and so on. Destroy, privatize, and get new markets where you can sell the products of the West and get a labor force. And this point was very important. You know, in the European Union, we had a plan made by Bolkestein, Franz Bolkestein. He was the commissioner for work in Europe, and he organized the destruction of the labor standards here in the West. He organized the importation of Polish, Romanian, Ukrainian, and other workers, men and women, so that they could be paid at a very low wage from your country and work here, which makes a possibility of great profits, great benefits for the companies. They pay their workforce much lower, and this has a general effect of pushing the wages down. And this was the idea, and it happened. For example, recently I had some repairs to do here around my home 1 year ago, and it was an old man. It was very nice, cheap, and he did it. But he said, I'm almost in my passion, and I will stop because now other workers are coming from other countries and they ask less, and I can do the job for this amount, so I will have to stop. So this importation of labor force, or you could say slaves, was the idea was to destroy the level of wages that had been obtained by workers here. So indeed, it was a project against Eastern countries and Western countries. And it was a project useful only for the 1%. I have organized, I have a show which is called Michel Midi. And one time I analyzed the poverty in many Eastern countries, Romania, Bulgaria, Eastern Germany, and so on, and the fact that the population is getting out, young people, people who could give economic dynamism, and in some areas you have only old people, and it becomes a desert. So that's the effect of European Union and false promises. This is a complete contrast with what is countries like Venezuela, Bolivia, and others are fighting for. I mean, a country needs economic sovereignty. A country must decide what is good for their people and not for the multinationals outside. I had exactly the same discussion yesterday in Michel Midi.
About Morocco.
About Morocco, exactly. Najib Akesbi, Moroccan economist, explained, well, we have the West, World Bank, IMF told us in the 70s, you have to work with comparative advantage, you have to work for exportation, a lot of labor force for vegetables and fruits, and you will sell it very well to our countries and it will be cheap, and so you will become rich. And in the contrary, Morocco, like many other countries, became very dependent and they are paid very low for the exportations. Of course, there is competition about this exportation. Spain is producing the same fruits and it's also cheap and it's closer. So Morocco is not winning. And he said the only solution for Morocco, but I think it's for every country, is we have to get our economic and political sovereignty back. We have to decide what is good for our economy, for our level of life for the people.
I want to say that this word which you used, slave from Eastern Europe, is adequate. I work in the logistic. Every day I have the contact with the truck drivers who came from Eastern Europe. Most of half the truck which I reception is from it is the drivers from the east, especially where it is the long trajectory from Belgium, from Germany, and the reality of these drivers is that they work 3 weeks in European Union. After these 3 weeks, they come back to Poland, Bulgaria, to 2 weeks to don't work. And in these 3 weeks, they work and they sleep in the truck.
Absolutely.
3 weeks you can and you can imagine now in the time of the catastrophe of the epidemic COVID-19. They said all the time, you have to go to your home, you have to wash your hands, hygiene is very important. And these people don't have water, don't have bathroom, don't have nothing. And they all the time they cross the borders. In the time when, for example, the Italy was closed in the beginning of the epidemic, nobody from France, the drivers don't wanted to go there, and they use the drivers, especially from Bulgaria, Poland, to go to the Italy. Everybody talks about that Italy now is the center of the epidemic, and they send all the drivers from the east. So
absolutely. I read a testimony recently from a woman, because truck drivers are also women, and she was even 6 weeks away from her home and her kids, the children. So you imagine a mother which cannot see her children for 6 weeks. It's a scandal. It's really modern slavery. And also, this is linked with a big problem of pollution. In Belgium, here, as we are really a crossroad of many countries, and in our motorways, not very far from here, you have constantly trucks and trucks and trucks. So it's not very safe to go there. And people are driving along a long time. So you can have a truck driver with a sleep. And also the pollution is terrible. So this is typically a capitalist way of organizing the international trade, the international commerce. I'm not against international commerce, but it's better to reduce that, to use the trains, to use the water, and as less trucks as possible. So this is a destruction and of the nature and the oxygen we can breathe, and destruction of human life of these drivers. Yes, we live in a now, since the destruction of socialism in the West, and since a certain form of capitulation of the labor movement in the West, and there was a link between both aspects. We live in a period of constant destruction of the standards of works and the protections of the workers. One of the next books we are going to publish is Deliveroo, which is a firm organizing that people who want to order a meal from a restaurant and eat it at home, because you work a lot, you have no time, and so on. Then you have young guys with their bicycles who go to the restaurant, wait for the meal, bring it to you, and they are very low paid. There is absolutely no protection, and their boss, the Deliveroo, is constantly denying they are the boss. So they refuse to apply the work contract and the protections. And when you make such a job with your bicycle, it's dangerous. You can have an accident, of course. And this happens. And they get nothing in case of that. So it's indeed a form of modern slavery. We are going back to 19th century.
I can say that in Paris, I worked 1 year in Pizzeria Domino's, and also I delivered in motorbike the pizza, and my motorbike every day was damaged. The most important damage was the tire, which are very glissant. But other things also was not good. But I think that in your videos in other videos about Deliveroo, I saw that one man who worked to Deliveroo, he said that sometimes when he had problem, he can't find the client. He take telephone and call to call center. And now they can't help him because the call center is in the Madagascar or I don't know where, but
Yes.
very, very long. And they don't know this city where he worked.
There's nobody to talk.
Yes.
It's just a machine. And indeed, Deliveroo, for example, or other firms, we have Uber about the taxis and so on. These firms, they apply an algorithm which decides you are going to take this work and you are not. It's completely secret, and the workers and the trade union who is defending them are convinced that in fact it is organized to give the work to the person who is going faster, but then it means you do not respect the legislation, how you rode with your bicycle to go faster. You may take a forbidden street and so on, and you are going too fast, and also other characters. Yes, it's a new trend of using internet, using platforms on internet to destroy the relation between the boss and the worker, when you can try to bring a relation of force and you can try to impose your protection.
Okay, I will ask you a third question. As a young man, you participated in demonstrations in the Vietnam War, and such demonstrations have taken place all over the world. What happened that in 1990s, when the US attacked Iraq or Yugoslavia, there were no such large demonstrations? Why is the left wing in Western countries not only not protesting against American wars, but even supporting them, as in the case of the war in Libya?
There are, I think, several factors. I think you have to make the connection with the fact that in the 60s, it was going up for the struggles generally in the world. You had important strikes in Belgium in 60, 61, for example, in France also, in Italy. You had an anti-war movement very active against Vietnam, and you had the democratic movement called Mai 68 in France, a big protest against reactionary culture, against a non-democratic way of organizing the teaching in universities and so on, relation man-woman too. And it was a part of these movements decided to join with workers in the factory, excuse me, and you had revolutionary movements and new Maoist parties who organized in the 70s. You had, of course, in the United States, the movement for civil rights, Black Panthers, a lot of democratic movement too, and the movement against the war in Vietnam, support for independence in the Third World. So it was really a rising and rising of the combativity of the labor movement, democratic movement, anti-war movement. And this was a reason for the multinationals to be afraid. They are organized in some think tanks and some clubs where they discuss the general problem of the class struggle, actually, and how they want to handle the world. And David Rockefeller from Exxon had organized the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral. And in these groups, in the 75, they said, we have a big problem. This activism and this request for more democracy is a danger, and we have to try to bring the people apathic. And you have some reports openly saying we have to make everything so that, for example, in the United States, the Black are not politically active. And one of the means was introducing a new form of drug, the crack, by the FBI in the suburbs of Los Angeles and so on, to paralyze the resistance and the rebellion of the workers. That's one point. The treason, the defeat of communist and left movements in Europe, in many countries, is another reason. We saw in the 80s the neoliberal ideas becoming popular, first with Margaret Thatcher, then Donald Reagan, and then a lot of opinion makers, influences in the West. When I was young, being an intellectual meant being progressive and struggling for a changed society and struggling some aspects, I will say, of capitalism. And then it was completely changed in the 80s, in the 90s. It was an organized offensive to destroy the credibility of the left ideas and to prepare the opinion for a lot of ideas like, well, people are selfish, there's no solidarity. Margaret Thatcher explaining such a thing as society does not exist, there is no alternative, and so on. And the idea that the market and the free market would bring prosperity to everybody. This was a promise exactly made in Poland, and in our countries too. So it took time. And since the workers' movement was disorganized and very passive, not combative anymore, it helped that the people went disorganized, and also the way of life. Previously, people were discussing more. There was more organizing meeting points and discussion in Belgium, for example. In France, you had people going to the cafe many times and discussing. And the new way of life was work and then go home on television and use your car to go to the supermarket And this was the modern life. Actually, everybody being alone, left alone, and without social debate, social connections. And well, I think the capitalism is also needs to have people making an individual way of life and destroying exchanges and solidarity. So I think all these aspects have helped to destroy the anti-war movement and in general the progressive movement. Plus one aspect we should mention is that the USA, they are not stupid, and their elite has taken lesson from the Vietnam defeat. And one of these lessons is don't show anymore that wars are killing people. Don't show anymore the dead people and suppress the evidence of atrocities and dramas. And this was organized in several tactics from, I think, this very important first Gulf War in 1991 against Iraq. And all journalists were embedded, and you have to be guided by the US Army, who was just showing you some touristic pictures and nothing from the real battle. And this was the reason why I made this book I was speaking about, Attention Media. And after that, the USA have constantly organized a way of diverting the attention. Don't look to the reality of the war, but just to the propaganda and some minor aspects, or even fabricating a lot of fake news. Now everybody thinks fake news, it's something from Donald Trump. It's recent, actually not. Fake news, that was the way of informing, the way of disinforming in the Gulf War, in the war against Yugoslavia, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, and another lot of wars, declared or not declared. So I think the battle of information is very important to understand why people now approve wars, why actually it's not that people like war and like that there are people suffering and being killed. It's that they are brought to believe a scenario which is a complete fiction. And the CIA and the US agencies have really organized this way of presenting a film to the people, a fiction.
Yes, but could you say something about the NGOs who support this imperialism? And all the time when the US wants to attack one countries, they create this legend that there are the dictator, that it is new Hitler, that the Saddam was the new Hitler, Gaddafi new Hitler, Nasser new Hitler, and when they use this propaganda, they always can find the idiot from the left who will say, yes, we don't support NATO, but Gaddafi is killing the people in Benghazi, and we have to defend these people.
Well, it's not only NGOs which played a big role; it's also political parties. It's a surprise that left parties, not only the Socialist Party, who is always in the government and can lead an imperialist war just the same as a rightist party, but even in France, for example, so-called radical left parties who declare themselves communist or Trotskyite or anarchist are approving the war. Not all, you have exceptions, but the trend is really that the vast majority approve this war for several reasons. First, they don't check the information, or they don't dare to contradict the information, because of course it's a huge pressure. All television, all journalists are saying, yes, Saddam is a monster. Yes, there is a genocide in Yugoslavia. Yes, Gaddafi was preparing to bombard the demonstration and so on. So you need courage to go against this so-called truth and to say, well, let's check Sorry, let's check the facts. So that's the first problem for this left, refuse to combat the media system. And another one is, since we live in our imperialist countries, we continue a colonial mentality. You know, in the Western Europe, we have been colonizing the world. We have been organizing the trade of slaves from Africa to America. We have been organizing the genocide of Indians in North and South America. We have made several wars against African countries. So we have produced here the ideology that is necessary to accept the atrocities of colonialism. What the Europeans, French, British, and Belgians made in Africa was not different from what Hitler has been doing in Europe. He was doing it to white people, so it was a big problem. But we were doing the same to black and brown people in other countries. So there was no difference. And this means this system has produced an ideology that makes us here in the West believe, yes, we are the best, and the world has to follow us and to copy us. And this mentality of Western ethnocentrism, Western arrogance, has infiltrated the European left too. That's a big problem.
Yes, I think that all these analyses of the Trotskys in the imperialist countries, when they said in Russia you can build socialism, in Cuba you can build socialism, in Africa, in Burkina Faso, and many countries like this, it is a little, for me, the racist mentality that only European, that before this it was this in 19th century they said European is better because are white, and now they said European are better because they are civilized, they are democratic, they are I don't know what, but always European are the best in the world.
Well, it's a complex question. I believe in the 90s the leaders of the workers' movement were believing that the revolution would come in the rich countries. Marx and Engels were believing that. And everybody thought where the capitalism is most advanced, there will come the first revolution. And many people are thinking about Germany. But I see a problem.
They disappear one more time. Okay. No, you have to disconnect and connect, I think. We are waiting for. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes, it's good.
Sorry for the bad internet connection. I was saying about
Marx and Engels.
Yes, everybody thought the revolution would happen in Germany, and then the reality, of course, which was always the master, and we have to learn from it. The reality thought that brought the fact that the revolution happened in Russia, which was a weak capitalist country, not at all developed. And it happens for two facts. First, the atrocity of capitalism was there very strong, and people were very poor, more than in the West. And the regime was very autocratic with absolutely no fake of democracy. And of course, the revolutionary opposition was very well organized and very well guided and had a good strategy to transform the problems of bread, peace, and social progress into a new system. And I think Lenin understood the transformation of perspective. And in the last years, he understood, well, the revolution will not come from the developed Europe, it will come from below. And he paid a lot of attention also to the liberation of the colonized countries. And this was, there was a theoretical understanding, in my view, by Mao Zedong, who explained, well, the system, the imperialist system is so developed pardon, that the revolution will come from the countries of the South. And it happened with China, Vietnam, Africa, who tried, and so on. And I think this changed the perspective. And indeed, some of the movements you mentioned, not all, some of them you may agree or not agree with their positions, but some try to have a realistic view of the forces in the world now. But most of them remain to the old view. Yes, we in the superior Europe, we know what is best. And they developed the theory that a revolution could not happen in a poor country, which contrary to the reality.
Okay, my another question is COVID-19 epidemic. So hundreds of thousands of people have died in the US and the European Union. Why, in your opinion, more than 500,000 people died in the USA and only 35 in Vietnam?
I have explained this in the book, which is in French called Planète Malade, 7 lessons, sick planet, sorry, 7 lessons of the COVID. I think there are several reasons. The first reason is that the public healthcare was destroyed in the Western neoliberal countries, while in countries like China, Vietnam, and others, it's a priority to build a public healthcare which can really protect the people. So when you had a lot of people sick, it was impossible in a developed country like Belgium or France or Italy or Spain to take care of all of them. And so it was horrible because doctors and nurses had to say, okay, we will take care of this one, and this one we cannot. We have too many people at the same time, an horrible situation. Another view is that there was this Western arrogance when China was fighting against the virus, end of December, first days of January, and when they were understanding what the virus was about, how it was functioning, how dangerous it was, they took very fast some measures to isolate the people, to build special hospitals to treat all these new patients.
In 10 days.
Yes, in 10 days, building 2 fantastic hospitals, bringing for about 45,000 doctors and nurses from the rest of the country to help Wuhan and this province. And there were many lessons from what the Chinese have been done. Have been lessons from the problems and the mistakes in the beginning, and then lessons of, well, actually, if you want to fight against an epidemic, you have to react fast and strongly. It's just like if you have a fire. You are not, if there is a fire in the place of your house, you are not going to sit and look, okay, let's look. If it goes until there, I will then call the fireman and so on. No, you will try immediately to bring what is necessary to suppress the fire immediately and completely. Well, it's the same for a pandemic. And the big problem is that in some socialist countries, they were willing to do that. China said, okay, we stop the economy. And in the West, they refused. And in the West, first in France and Belgium, during January and February, we had a lot of fake news. Well, the virus is a question for China, don't be careful, it's not very aggressive, and so on. And of course, there was another thought in the brain of our leaders. The thought was, oh, it's good. China has a big problem. This will help to make a contest against the leadership of the Communist Party. And we can hope that this will bring a regime change. And what should have been done? When you see such a big pandemic with a very dangerous virus, you should send doctors and scientists and psychologists and everybody to make a mission of investigation in China and see what they are doing, what is working, what is not working, and take the lessons for your country. Nothing was done. We have slept in France and Belgium and other Western countries. We have slept 2 months, lost. And of course, when the virus comes, it's too late. Then you have real mass of people sick, and this brought a drama. I said socialist country. I could have mentioned also Cuba and Venezuela, who have organized a very good counter-fighting. And the big question in counter-fighting is not to work for the vaccine or that. The main problem is healthcare on the ground, going house by house, looking at the people and seeing what you can do to educate them, to trace them, to test, to isolate them when necessary. And when you isolate people, to help them, to bring them a doctor daily or a nurse, and to bring the food and help them, bring them moral support and so on. That's a big difference between capitalist individualism and a collective system. Now, I said there is a big difference between the no response of the Western capitalism and the rather efficient response of all these socialist countries I mentioned. But I have to say, you don't need absolutely to be a socialist country to make an intelligent and reasonable and prudent strategy against the virus. You find also a good attitude and good measures, not complete, of course, not the social aspects, but the rest, yes, reaction fast and strong. You found it also in South Korea, in Singapore, in
Taiwan.
Yes, also. And some countries who said, okay, we have had the coronavirus in 2003. We have seen how it can be dangerous. So now let's react immediately and strongly. And you had also a good strategy, a good policy in New Zealand, which is a complete capitalist and pro-Western country, but led by, I don't know very well the situation, but I can just state that the prime minister there said immediately, okay, we have to protect people, we have to be radical measures. They studied what was happening in China. this was not the same kind of arrogance of the main Western countries. So I think you have very important lessons for the problems in our countries and for the good lessons of some countries who have done better.
I think also that we say something about the solidarity, that in the China, all country was solidar with province Wuhan. And in the same time, in Europe, when the epidemic was only in the north of Italy, the Germany and other countries of European Union, they banned the sending the medical supplies. And also the first doctors who came in Italy to help, it was the Cuban doctors from Venezuela and men from Russia, but not from European Union.
Well, you know, in the traditional Western capitalism, it's you take care of yourself and you don't care of the others. That's the ideology of the market, individual interests. So when there is a big crisis, it's everybody for own sake and no solidarity. Yes, it was a very good demonstration.
So now let's talk about Venezuela. You are a collaborator with Telesur and the author of Chavez 7 Sins. A year ago, the US and the EU planned a coup and wanted to install an associate of the Colombian mafia, Juan Guaido, in Venezuela. Could you please tell Polish viewers what are the Chavez 7 Sins?
Well, I think Hugo Chavez was really a very important experience of resistance against the plundering of not only Venezuela but Latin America. You know, there is a famous book, I don't know if it was translated into Polish, Eduardo Galeano, Las Viertas Abiertas de América Latina, the open veins of Latin America. I was describing very concretely the plundering by US and European multinationals of every Latin American country. And this book was written in the 50s, 70s, and even 70s, I think. And well, I actualized it, explaining how the West was plundering oil, gas, Amazon biodiversity, and labor force of Latin America. And it was when I came for the first time in Venezuela in 2005 or six, I think, six. I was surprised when you walk in Caracas, you could see very rich areas with not villas, but really palaces with a lot of Ferrari and Porsche and so on, and gardens and cameras and barbed wire and everything, real palace. While a bit further, you could see people living in some very small blocks with no water, no hygiene. I saw rats just around babies and terrible conditions of hygiene and so on, and suffering from hunger too. That's it. So the reason was the oil had been stolen since 80 years, completely stolen. The US multinationals, Exxon, Chevron, etc., British Petroleum, have not paid $1 of tax to the Venezuelan state since many years. Not $1. All the money was going out. So Chavez came and said, "Okay, now it's finished. You are going to pay tax. We are going to take 51% in the exploitation. We are going to really put the oil exploitation under public control, and this money will be used to give you doctors, teachers, and jobs for the kids, and so on." So he really brought a social revolution, not complete, but very interesting. He had, of course, a very fantastic popularity. Of course, there were adversaries also. social class, but also the propaganda of the televisions, which was remaining private. And so I think it was a very good lesson what Chavez brought to Venezuela, ever more or less also to Bolivia. And I thought, well, it was necessary to explain against Western arrogance and ignorance, explaining what was really happening there.
I can say something about the taxes which Americans don't want to pay. That 1 year and a half ago, there was a visit. Trump have to come to Poland, but he changed his mind. He rested in the USA, and he sent. It was Mike Pence who come to Poland. It was in the September 2019. And 2 weeks before this, the Polish government of Morawiecki, they started to talk about the making taxes for the Amazon and other big tech American companies in Poland. They want the taxes, tax it, and Mike Pence, without conversation with Morawiecki and Polish president, in the press conference in Poland, he announced there will be no taxes for the American multinationals, and they don't pay.
Yes, of course. The boss of the world, of course.
Finally, I would like to ask you about the media campaign against China. There is a growing racism against Chinese people in NATO countries, promoted by Trump with his racist term Chinese virus. Recently, it has been very popular to accuse China of trying to murder all Uyghurs and to persecute Muslims. Why are there large demonstrations in Muslim countries where photos of Macron and the French flag are burned, and relations with China are intensifying in these countries?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been explaining in the book I mentioned, Sick Planet, Planet Malade, I've been explaining the reason for this real war, disinformation campaign against China. The real reason is that the Chinese state, you may approve what they are doing or not, but you have to state that they are doing economically very well. Now, everybody tell us communist understands nothing to the economy, and now you have a communist government who is bringing the Chinese economy higher than the US economy. And they have been getting 800 millions of people out of the poverty, while in the West and also in third world dominated by the West, poverty is increasing. So that is one problem for the US domination, the European domination. And they are much advanced in question of patents or in question of scientific research, technologies, and so on. They are demonstrating that a sort of economy which is combining private market for some sectors for a certain time, or can be a long time, and a state direction and public nature of some strategic sectors that you do not allow to private interests is stronger than the anarchy and the anarchy of USA or Europe. The economy is just stronger, that's it. And of course, it's a danger for them, first because then they lose markets, and then it brings the people to the idea, well, maybe socialism is not so bad as we have been told, and maybe we should just look at it. I'm not saying here that everybody should make like China. Situations are different. You have to look in every country which kind of organization of the society is the best for your country. But you have also to take lessons from other experience. So that's a big problem for the domination of the West. losing markets, losing credibility. And as I said, in the pandemic, countries like China, Cuba, Vietnam have been doing 100 times better than we have been doing. So people will have to think about that. Now, in some countries, in Serbia, for example, in Europe or in other countries, the Chinese are bringing a lot of vaccines and the West not, or you have to pay a big price. So I think the demonization of China is to make us accept manufacturing consent, make us accept that the force is necessary against China and that we have to spend a lot of money to organize a military encirclement of China and all taxes now. In Belgium, for example, we are paying for fighters F-35 from the USA, very, very expensive. And now I read this morning in the paper that they are not working and that they have more than 800 problems, technical problems, and that even the Pentagon is not relying on this plane. But we have to pay a lot of money, while with that money, we could build hospitals that we need, or we could pay our nurses much better than we are doing. A nurse in Belgium is very low paid, and that's a drama because it's a hard job. It's a very necessary job. You need courage. We have seen it, and they are low paid because we buy fighters which are completely useful, completely useless. I mean, who is pretending that Belgium will be attacked? Nobody is intending to make war against Belgium, so it's just a waste of money. So I think the demonization of China, there are many goals which I explained: impede the economic competition, impede to compare economic and social system, destroy the attention of the faults, the mistakes, and the crimes of some elites in the West, and take an enemy, attract the attention to an outside enemy. But it's a very dangerous campaign, and we are in Investig'Action and in my show Michel Midi inviting people regularly to present the fact that we should not believe, we should check the facts, and we should check the fact that, for example, it has nothing to do with Muslim religion. In China, you have many Muslims, there are absolutely no problem, and it's about the question of terrorism. You had a lot of crimes committed by terrorism in China, in Xinjiang, but also in Peking, horrible atrocities. And you would not accept that in the USA and in France, and they had a very discutable policy against terrorism. But we are supposed to say that Chinese should let the terrorists do, etc. No, it's a completely falsification of information.
Maybe we can give a number. It is 254, if I remember good. It's from your videos. 254.
Yeah.
It was from this conversation with. I forgot.
A good listener.
So I can say that Poland also have to buy this F-35. So we are in the same position, and Polish army is very strange because we have all the time the things from 1960s, 1970s. So very old, it was socialist production. So it is resistible, but it is more than 50 years now in the Polish army. In the same time, they buy these things very, very cheap, very, 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 very expensive, and very, very modern. But Polish president, in Poland we have one of the holiday, anti-communist holiday. It is 1st of March. It is the day of the anti-communist terrorist who killed the people, children in 1940s, when we have the new socialist Poland built it. We have terrorists, anti-communists. Their name is cursed soldiers. It's wyklęci in Poland, and we have you encore one more time. But maybe, oh no, I will continue that that in the we're waiting for the Michel Collon to finish, say goodbye. So welcome back. So I will finish that. 1st March, it is the day of anti-communism in Poland. And in the 1st of March, so 10 days ago, Duda, our president, he was calling the President Xi Jinping to China to command the vaccine from China, because we already paid to Americans, but they don't send this vaccine Americans for Poland. And we have catastrophe in Poland now. A lot of people dying from the COVID-19. So
please send information for Investig'Action.
About this, okay. And Duda, he's the coward, so he didn't want it to call, because he already called President Xi Jinping 1 year ago, when in Poland we didn't have a mask. So he called President Xi Jinping 1 year ago. China was sending Poland a lot of medical supplies, but after this, Trump was angry to Poland. So Duda didn't want it to do this, but Orban, he from Hungary, he commanded 5 million of the Sinopharm. And after this, Duda if Orban he's the first, I will be the second. And now Poland started to command this a lot of vaccine from China. It is, I think that it is the first decision good for Duda in 2021. So what? So thank you very much for your interview. Of course, I have many other questions for you, but I respect your time, and all people who want to more and know French language, go to Investig'Action site internet.
You have to know that we have a very few videos and also one book translated into English. So this might be useful also for your country. And maybe we have short books and short pieces that it would be useful to be translated into Polish if there is a possibility. So I think we need to exchange much more among countries in solidarity. And I suggest also that we receive information about Poland to explain, because the mainstream media are not explaining what you are mentioning about the situation in your country, and we need to have information about that.
Okay, Uncle, one more time, thank you very much. I will